Okay, today let's talk about choosing a knife. As with any tool, one size does not fit all. So, in choosing the knife, all right, we got to ask ourselves, what are we doing with it? All right? These are very important questions because I see some people entering certain situations with a knife that maybe isn't quite suitable for that knife. So what are we going to use this knife for? Is it going to be hunting? All right, fishing. Wood processing. Okay, and in terms of wood processing, I'm talking about fire. And shelter craft. Next, you're going to be using it for carving. Now, of course, these are all for the outdoorsman, okay? I'm not talking about utility knives and things like that. Although some knives do lend themselves to a more utilitarian type of, applications. Maybe stronger tips for prying open crates, different things like that. So this is what we're going to talk about. Now, fire and shelter. And you'll hear a lot of this terminology in survival settings and in bushcraft. So in a survival setting or in a bushcraft setting, these two things right here are very, very important. Why they're very, very important is because they can really determine your comfort level out in the bush, right? If it's very cold, of course you're going to need a fire and probably a shelter. Maybe it's very hot and you just want to throw up a tarp to sort of, block some sun maybe, or perhaps a thunderstorm is on its way. It's 80-some degrees, but still, that can leave you cold at night. These are the most important things in that setting that need to be taken care of. So, we have larger knives, right? And I would say a large knife, I'm just going to say anything from 8 inches and up. Okay? Now, when I'm speaking of a knife in these terms here, we're maybe not talking so much as the exotic blade shapes, right? Like kukris and, bolos, maybe some different things like that, parangs. I'm talking more or less your standard survival knife, if you will. The bowies, the drop points, things like that. All right, we're going to put medium. And I would say a medium is going to be anywhere from 4 to 8. And then we're going to go small, okay? 4 inches and below. All right? So these are important aspects, right? If we're talking about shelter and fire, you're going to need to get wood. If you're in a setting like I am, and maybe a day like it is today, it's about 4 degrees out, and there's about 3 feet of snow on the ground. So gathering, wood from the ground is a no-go. It's just not going to happen. You're not going to dig down through all that snow. And even if you did, we'll say you have a shovel with you, that snow is going to be so crusted with snowpack, or that wood is going to be so crusted with just snowpack that it's going to be very difficult to get lit. Perhaps once a fire is well established, you can begin to throw some of the more marginal wood on. So you can't hand gather, all right, because the snow is about waist deep. The other thing you're gonna have to take into effect is the size trees that are in your location. All right, so if they're 3 or 4 inches around, usually you can't push over good wood. That usually isn't the case. Usually it's so punky that you can push something this big over. That's not going to help you start a fire, and it really isn't going to throw off a lot of heat, smokeless heat, which is necessary because you're talking about having to have a shelter when you're looking at weather as I'm describing. And in that situation, you're looking at a large knife. Nothing's going to do that work better. So my recommendation would be, whatever setting you're in, take the largest tool. It could be an axe, it could be a saw, but take the largest tool you can carry because it's going to minimize work. Now, the largest tool to you that you're comfortable with might be a 7-inch knife, whatever it is, but carry the larger tool. So this is going to be great at affecting these types of things. In terms of fine carving out in the woods, netting needles in these different things, figure 4 traps and the likes, let's face it, it's really not a necessity. Long-term wilderness living, perhaps it is, I'll give that to you, but never in a 72-hour survival situation, or let alone really just general, 2-3 week canoe trips, different things like that, woods bumming trips that are extended. Usually this is not the case. Further on top of that, the large knife can do a lot of those things, and if you choose the right large knife and you are well rehearsed with it, it's going to be a lot easier on you in terms of that. So we're looking at obviously the important aspects: ridge poles, clearing brush out of the way, felling trees, sectioning up wood to get it into your shelter, and those different things. And you're going to want better wood. And when you need fire the most, it's the hardest to make. When it's freezing rain, when it's the dead of winter, it usually is the hardest to make. So we're going to want something like this. These blades here, of course, I probably have to say that I am usually more of a medium type of a belt knife guy because I usually have another tool with me, which is highly recommended. Small knives, hey, they can work just as well, and there's some great, knowledgeable individuals who swear by this blade length. Now, what is most important? What is most important out of a lot of this, okay, is geometry. Okay? That determines the functionality of the heat treat of the steel. So many people I see picking this first. Well, that's ridiculous. That is completely ridiculous. This is what does the cutting. A piece of paper can cut you, but a ball of 3V will not. Geometry. Geometry is what it's all about. And this will determine the functionality of this heat treatment. So you have to ask yourself, when you have a knife that's this thick, right? We'll say we're looking at it from your cross section here. When you have a knife this thick and it's in 1095, and then the maker makes the same knife in the same thickness, we'll just say, and he has it in 3V, what is the reason for that? What is the intended reason for 3V? It's not going to cut any better because the geometry does the cutting, right? This part here. This is what does the cutting. So it's not going to cut any better. The only thing that it's going to introduce to the situation is wear resistance, corrosion resistance, maybe some different things like that, toughness, whatever. But this has a lot to do with heat treatment. So we're talking about the geometry, and it does determine the functionality of the heat treatment of the steel. And I would say go the thinnest you can go in whatever it is you are doing. The thinnest for a woods bowie in the northern forests where I am might be 3/16 on a 9 or 10 inch blade. That would be what I would go with, and I would choose the proper geometry and the proper steel to suit that. Of course, you're hoping that it's all properly heat treated. So this is what we're going to want. You want to go the thinnest for that because it's just going to work better. It's going to slice better. It's going to do all these things. In general, you will not need to split a lot of wood. That's just not going to happen unless you are feeding a wood-burning stove or something like that. Sometimes it is beneficial to split wood inside a winter shelter because it burns hotter and it burns brighter and it puts off less smoke. And inside an enclosed area, that is obviously a very good thing. All of these can be overcome with wedges, and I see a lot of people skip over that part. Make a wedge. Doesn't matter if your knife 999 times out of 1,000 will not have an issue batoning 4-inch, 5-inch, 6-inch rounds of seasoned red oak or hickory. You don't want to take the chance. I mean, that's your tool. Let alone being in a situation where you can't just walk out and just, I broke my knife. Well, whatever. I'm going to be going home in a couple hours anyways. Suppose you're actually on some type of expeditionary thing, or you're caught out somewhere, or, you're going out for a 3-4 day, sort of a little bit of an extended stay. Save your tool. You're going to be at camp, and it literally takes several minutes to make a couple wedges. And with a wedge, you can split about anything, really. So geometry. Steel. This is a big one. This is, like I said, what everyone argues over, what everyone talks about. This one's better than this one. That one's better than this one. That one's better than that one. Well, what are you using it for? You'll see that many people who use their knives daily still prefer more of the simple carbon steels. Reason being is you're probably going to end up spending the same amount of time sharpening your knife. One of them is just going to hold the edge longer. You may have to sharpen a 1095 steel every half hour, we'll just say, but it only takes you a minute. Where 3V, maybe you can sharpen it every 3 hours, but it's going to take you 10 minutes. Furthermore, you're going to need different media to cut that steel. When we look at more of the simple carbon steels, which when you look at indigenous cultures more so, with their large knives, or even woodsmen with axes, you're looking at things that can be sharpened readily in the field, and they hold their edges long enough. It's just steels like 1075, 1080, 1055, 1060. These steels aren't the fad anymore. So we've created crucible particle metallurgy, and of course the edges are great. They are phenomenal. I own a 3V knife, an S30V. They are. The edges are so pristine. There's never a roll. There's never a nick. I mean, it really is phenomenal. But I generally ask myself the question of, is this really maintainable in the field or without anything excessive? Can I take a river rock to sharpen this? And usually you'll find that no, you can't. Some people don't want to sharpen their knives in the field. Some people want to do it at home. Bottom line is if you're out there long enough, you're going to have to sharpen it in the field. This is one of those things again. You're going to choose whatever is suitable for your situation. Maybe you live in a saltwater environment, okay? Maybe you are in more of a desert environment. These play a huge role. Your environment. Like we're saying, what may work in my area and what may work with me may not work for you. So these are all questions you should ask yourself. I am in no means slamming S30V or 3V or those steels and promoting the other ones because those are the ones I prefer. It's completely up to you in terms of what you feel suits you the best. I will just say, look at the people who are at the forefront of wilderness living and bushcraft and those types of things, and look at what they're generally using. And you will find that they are using more of the simpler carbon steels, 1095 especially, and 01. And the knives that they're using can be available in other steels. Those happen to be the ones that they're choosing. A heat treat. All right. Of course, I do have these out of order. I should have geometry, heat treat, steel. But so the heat treat. All right. We're talking about Rockwell hardness. Well, you can have 3V. We'll just say, right? We can. Hopefully, you can see this. We can have 3V at 60, right? Which is a very recommended place for it to be. Of course, if we bring it up higher, we're going to hold an edge longer, but it's going to be really, really hard to sharpen. In general, I find that a lot of hardness of the steels that I like to use, the more simpler carbon steels, seem to be somewhere between 56 and 60. And those are just generally speaking probably my favorite steel, which is 1095. 01 is another one that I do like. Of course, you can get the chrome vanadium, which sometimes can sort of bridge this gap and turn this 1095 and give it some of the properties, in a sense, of the 01, if you will. So if this Rockwell is too low, we'll get a very, very quick edge in the field. For instance, the Estwing hatchet. It's 1055 steel, and it's Rockwelled at 1055. Excuse me. Very, very tough steel, and a little bit on the softer side. What does that mean for the user out in the field? Well, it means pretty much if I just have a mill file on me, so to speak, I could demolish a shed and start a campfire and never have to go and use any type of special media on it at all. It'll come back to life readily on a piece of leather, a piece of sandpaper, a piece of cardboard. Because of the impurities in the cardboard, the very thing that dulls your knife is what sharpens it. So it's Rockwelled on the lower side. And you'll find that with a lot of more of your heavier tools that take a lot of impact. Axes, mauls, hatchets, and a lot of your large knives are going to be Rockwelled lower. For that very reason, you don't want to have a nick in your blade miles away from a bench stone. It's better to roll it and be able to repair it. So choosing the knife. What is the single largest factor in choosing a knife is choosing what other tools you are going to have on you. And every woodsman worth their salt has a toolkit. You can play into the fantasies of the one tool option and stuff, and I like to do that as well. It's fun to think about. But I would never, nor would any woodsman worth their salt, as I said, go out and put themselves in that predicament. I know of no trappers who would do that, or any of the likes of the people who are at the forefront of wilderness living and bushcraft knowledge would ever recommend just having one tool. Perhaps there's an issue when you lose gear or something happens and you do have one tool. Hopefully that one tool is the one that is going to be easiest for you to affect what you need to get done. So choosing the knife, as I said, a lot of it's going to depend on the other tools that you have, right? If it's the dead of winter and I'm in the heavily wooded areas of Ontario, Canada, right? I'm probably going to have an axe, all right? Probably a 3/4 axe, or as many call it, a boy's axe. I should have a saw, whether it's an 18-inch D-ring handled saw or a 24-inch bow saw, right? At this point, my knife really, really doesn't matter. An axe can build a home and all the furniture that goes into it. A proper axe, sharpened well, and with your skills, sharpened, honed, puns intended, is going to determine a lot. I can make, and I have videos where I make, very nice feather sticks with several different axes, which can readily take a spark from a ferro rod, different things like that. Of course, a lighter or a match will do it. And so you can take all your kindling and do all that. So in this situation here, what does my knife really need to be? Well, geez, many instances I get away with just a Stockman, which is my jackknife. And I've showed it many, 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 many times. Okay, I can get away with that. What am I really doing with this? Anything that a small knife needs to do. Cut cordage, fish game, food prep, different things like that. And of course, feather sticks all day long with a smaller knife like this. It is easier. So suppose I don't have this. Well, this isn't really what I would want to use. Can I find ways around it? Sure, and so could you. But that's not the whole point of it. In this instance, once again, we're still maybe talking the heavily forested areas in the winter of Ontario, Canada. I'm going to choose one of those larger knives like we talked about. And there's a lot of great ones out there. There's the BK9. Ontario makes the SP 5, 10, 50, the 51. Tops makes a bunch of them. Cold Steel makes a bunch of them. Bark River makes a bunch of them. Numerous makers. Von Temsky Bowie would be another one, although it's not as ergonomic and geared towards it. Man, I'd take it over a 5-inch belt knife any day. You're going to be able to get more work done. The firewood's going to come quicker and easier. The availability of the wood you can use. There may be a lot of 4- and 5-inch deadwood trees that you can't push over that are in your camp area, but you just can't get a hold of them because you can't take them down. Of course, in this instance, we have the saw. Always have the kit. Always have the kit. Suppose I don't have the saw. Well, I'm definitely going to want the axe again, right? The 3/4. I'm going to still want a knife, and usually I really like a 6-inch blade, and I always have my Stockman on me. So I'll be able to affect what I need. A lot of this stuff is not pretty. We'll move to the next part. All right? We're going to move to, maybe you want, in highly corrosive environments, salt water, things like that. We're going to want maybe something like that. There's numerous steels that are going to have a little bit higher corrosion resistance. 440, of course, there's A, B, C. I see a lot of the A and the B sort of get a bad rap, and it's a little needless because a company like Linder really, because of the heat treat, really maximizes the attributes of a 440A steel. So this is what you might want to pick. As I said, in conclusion to this, geometry determines the functionality of the heat treatment of the steel, and I've repeated this numerous times because it's probably one of the most important things I would ever say on the subject. And it's one of the most overlooked. People focus on the steel. They focus on the steel, and that's it. And they usually get knives that just don't have good cutting geometries or not as suitable for what they want to do. Bottom line is, as I stated, go with the thinnest you can go with in your style. If it's a knife for butchering, go nice and thin. All you're doing is butchering. You're cutting through meat. The thinness of that stock steel and the keenness of that edge, you'll be able to pass through the things that you need to pass through. If you do a lot of batoning in the woods, go with the thinnest that allows you to affect what you baton. It could be 3/16. Maybe that's the thinnest you want to go. It could be 1/4 inch. Maybe that's the thinnest. The grinds also have an effect. 3/16 with a saber grind. The height of that saber grind is going to determine a lot of that too. It's not all about the stock thickness. A full height 1/4 inch grind may slice better than a 3/16 low saber grind. Geometry. So pick what works best for you and in your situation. And above all, remember that the geometry is what does the cutting. And try to go with the thinnest you can to execute the things that you like to do out in the woods. Don't make things so thin that they're going to break in your usage, and don't make things too thick that they're not going to cut properly in your usage. Probably have many more videos relating to this. I may have talked in circles a bunch of times and probably wrote things that maybe didn't make sense all the time, but thank you very much for watching, and take care.